Hi, I'm Liz Jackson. Jackson does not sound like an Eastern European name, but that's where my grandparents came from. And probably someone at Ellis Island thought it was funny. They said, give us a good American name. And an immigration officer at Ellis Island, we think, gave us the name Jackson. So my grandparents came from the border between Russia and Poland that was a moving border because of war, and they fled pogroms, murderous attacks on Jewish communities there, and they also fled a draft into the Tsar's army. Both of my great grandfathers were going to be forced to fight for the Tsar of Russia, and they didn't want to. So, and then there's also some love story in there because one of my great grandmother had eloped with the local. She was supposed to marry a rabbi from the village, and she fell in love with someone else, like a rogue, is also a rabbi, but a rogue rabbi, I guess, from a neighboring village. And so she eloped, and it disgraced the family, and then they were barren and couldn't have any children. They had children, and every one of their children died. They had like 3 or 4 in a row who died. And then she went back and she made a formal apology in front of the whole village for disgracing her family, and then she actually then she started having babies that survived, but they were still kind of disgraced. Okay, so that part of the story was kind of not that important to the immigration part, but they were still disgraced, so they wanted to start new. And they came, and she was, my great-grandmother came alone with 3 children, and then she ended up having 10 more here, and they lived in a small town up in Maine, Rockport, Maine. And my great-grandfather was the village rabbi, and he actually he used to make sure that cows were kosher, and that was how he died young, because he got a disease from sticking his hand up the cows, we think, to make sure they're kosher. Okay, we are all immigrants, and I, really am dedicated to immigrant rights because I see that, the humanity in all people, and I think that people who immigrate for love, for economic survival, fleeing war, are people who should actually deserve higher and greater rights because they are risk takers and survivors, and that's what happened to my family, and they didn't need any kind of legal documentation to immigrate here. They came as illegal immigrants, as we'd call them today, but that was fine earlier in the century, or last century. So, what I see happening in Arizona today and in other parts of the country is the level of dehumanization that justifies violence against, against regular people, good people, even if they weren't good, but they are, families, workers. That kind of dehumanization is very similar to what happened to Jews in Europe, that made the Holocaust possible and made the pogroms possible that my ancestors fled from. So I identify really strongly with what's happening now, and I see it as dangerous and violent, and we have to stop it. So what I hope for America is that we rehumanize all people, and especially workers, families, survivors, risk takers.